When a trucking person tells me our payroll only costs a few $100s a month, I know we're about to uncover a very expensive misunderstanding. At 10 trucks, payroll looks cheap. At 40, 50, 60 trucks, payroll doesn't just cost more, it starts hiding inside other parts of the business. Today, we're breaking down what trucking payroll really costs once you're running a mid-sized fleet and why most growing fleets dramatically underestimate this number. Welcome back to Driven for Success, the podcast for owners and executives of trucking fleets that want fewer headaches, better drivers, cleaner systems, and a whole lot less chaos in their business. I'm your host, Mike Ritzema, owner of Superior Trucking Payroll Service, where our mission is simple to help trucking families. If your fleet has outgrown 5 truck thinking, this episode is for you. First, we've got a question of the week. The question is, how do I put the tips and the overtime onto my W-2? Okay, I'll admit I added the tips part because that's just going to matter to some people. Not enough truck drivers get tips for it to matter. I'd love to see a truck driver that got a tip and had to pay tax on it, but I don't think that happens. So, how do we put the overtime on there? Okay, first of all, you don't have to put it on there this year. If you're doing your own W-2s, you get a reprieve this year that you can give the employee a statement saying this is how much the overtime premium was. But if you're putting on the W-2, you put it in box 14 and you label it as overtime, and it's just the premium. So it's just the half of the time and a half. So if you had an employee making $20 an hour and they had 10 hours of overtime in the whole year, that premium is the 10 to get them from 20 to 30 times the 10 hours. So it'd be $100. That's the number that goes in there. Again, you don't have to do it this year. I would do it if you can. If you have questions about it, reach out to us, of course. But tips go on Social Security tips already. So you should be covered there. But yeah, that's going to be the requirement. By the way, if you're watching this and you're somebody who was supposed to get the overtime amount on their W-2 and you didn't, you don't need to harass your employer, especially if it's a former employer. They're not going to help you. You can make a reasonable estimate and sign off on it, and that should work for this year according to the latest IRS guidance. That may change. It often does, but I think we're going to be pretty good on that one, given the time of year that we're already in. Recording this on the 19th of December. So we shouldn't have any major changes coming our way this year. But now let's talk about, you know, the cost of payroll isn't the cost of payroll. A lot of fleets measure payroll like this, we pay X amount per run. And quite honestly, as a payroll service, that's how we bill it. We say, okay, you've got 65 employees and you're paying every week. Here's your rate. And there's other ways to do it, which we'll talk about, but that's, here's your rate every week. And that's what they think of that as their payroll cost. But that's not just the payroll cost. That's the cost of getting it processed. But there's other hidden costs that you might not be thinking about. There's costs, they're real. There's things like people. There's the time on your side to get things ready. There's the errors and the cost of all the things to go to correct those errors. And again, we're talking about time mostly. We're also talking about, compliance to make sure that you're doing things the way you're supposed to do it. And also even things like driver turnover. If you pay a driver incorrectly and you don't fix it right away, they're not going to trust you. And if they don't trust you, they're going to leave. More drivers leave over trust than anything. That's true of all, not just unique to trucking, but if they don't trust you, they're not going to stay. It's not about cents per mile. We just did an episode about that, I think, last week. So payroll touches more than one department. Once it does that in a bigger company, because you have multiple departments feeding into payroll, you'll have an HR person, you might have accounting, you might have some dispatch input. It stops becoming a task and it starts to become an operational system. And systems either scale or they consume you. Like those, that's just how it works. So let's talk about the costs, first of all. There's the cost I mentioned, you got 65 people and it's every week and it's this much. By the way, free plug for us. Go to our website at truckingpayroll.com and you can get your price and you're going to know that's the right price. And it's not going to have all the other add-ons on it. Truckingpayroll.com. Okay, end of shameless plug. But it could be your service fees. It could be your payroll software subscriptions. It could be, if you're paying extra fees for tax filing or amendments or year-end filings or storage fees or garnishment handling or 401k administration, all of that stuff. Paper checks. Some companies charge for paper check. Those costs are going to rise as you grow. They rise linearly. You pick up a little bit of scale and it gets cheaper per person. Almost everywhere I've ever seen. But they're predictable. and they're visible, and that's really not the issue. The issue is not the couple $100 you're paying per week for payroll or whatever it ends up being for you. When you start getting past 30 trucks, you've got a person who's dedicated to doing payroll, like a payroll coordinator, even if it's not their full-time job. Someone has to get all this stuff together. They have to wrangle it on your side. You can use your TMS for a lot of these things, but someone still has to look at it. You've got dispatchers who impact pay. For example, if a driver gets detention, maybe they have to get that approved by an owner or something like that. So now you get the ownership in it, you got the dispatcher in it. You've got people answering driver questions, managers. You've got all these other things going on. You're also going to have more likelihood to have garnishments. If you're doing it in house, it becomes a bigger issue because you have to know how to handle them. When you had 5 trucks, you didn't really worry about it because you knew all 5 of the people. They didn't have any garnishments or anything like that. But at 30 trucks, that's going to happen. At 60 trucks, it's for sure going to happen. So, let's do some math here. If payroll touches 5 people for an hour or 2 a week each, which I think is a little light because you're probably more in the payroll coordinator and maybe less than some of the other people. But that payroll coordinator is going to have to go around to all these other people and get the information verified and approved and things like that. If you have an average loaded cost means including benefits and payroll tax and all the other things that go into an employee. If you're between $30 and $50 an hour, which is not unreasonable at all. You're spending between $600 and $1,500, each month to get this done. You've got 5 to 10 hours a week at $30 to $50 an hour. So you're, right? You could easily be $2,000 a month in internal payroll costs, not including payroll processing fees or anything like that. But that number never is listed on your P&L as payroll, so a lot of companies don't see it that way. They see it as labor. They see it as office expense, office wages, whatever you want to call it. But it's really real, and those things take time. So, and then you get into things like errors. Payroll errors don't show up labeled as mistakes. They show up as unhappy drivers. They show up as having to get it corrected. And it becomes a fire. But drivers, if your company, say, is in Indianapolis and your driver's taking a load to Seattle and they're in the middle of Minnesota and there's a problem with their payroll and they're really mad. They're like, I'm going to stop this truck. Well, you got to get that load delivered, which means, you have some counseling to do with the driver and some trust to build up, but the immediate clear and present problem is we got to solve this problem for this driver, which means multiple people have to stop what they're doing. It's not like when we were talking about the 1 to 2 hours a week for 5 people, there's some wiggle room in when that is. We could do it Monday or we can do it Tuesday or whatever, whenever you have a minute. A payroll emergency, that's got to be handled now, or that driver's going to quit. Even if they don't threaten to park the load, they're still going to quit. And then, how much does it cost to hire a new driver? It's another, $5,000 on average. And I think that's low. So, that's where it comes up. And it's in the time you have to correct it. You may have to pay another payroll fee to get it corrected, depending on your situation and your setup. Some of the things are hard to correct in the moment, depending on who you work with. It's all this kind of stuff. And you have to, if it's a mistake from a prior period, you may have to amend tax returns, especially when we're getting to the end of the year. I'll make it up. Let's say you pay on Wednesdays or Thursdays, but you're going to pay on Wednesdays the next 2 weeks. If you make a mistake on the December 31st payroll, you don't realize it until into January, there might be some amended returns that have to be done. And which then involve possible late tax payments and penalties. Yeah, it just hopefully it doesn't happen to you. And hopefully, again, if it's a driver thing, they're going to tell you that day. But you still, it's all the stuff that you got to do that now becomes the fire you had no intention of putting out today. And that's what you're putting out today. So that's part of the hidden cost of a payroll thing, especially with the errors. The real cost isn't the mistake. It's the rework and it's the driver trust loss or office person trust loss or whoever you like. You just can't have that. And so it every time you got to fix it, it steals time from people who should be talking about moving freight or hiring drivers or getting invoices out the door. It shouldn't be about correcting math or anything like that. So, here's like the cash flow goes with it too. Now you've got to make an emergency wire transfer to get your payroll done, which just causes problems because we all know trucking is such a cash type industry that you're really managing things down to the penny. And so you're already looking at, okay, if you're using a factoring company, you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to get today, and this is where it's going. And now I got an extra $1,000 because I forgot to pay somebody. Now I got to factor that in somehow, which hopefully it's not that tight for you. I want that for you, but I'm also a realist, and that's what's going on right now because just starting to get a little bit better now, just the smallest little bit. We're just seeing cracks, but it's been bad for 3.5 years. If $1,000 doesn't stress you out, good on you. But it create all that again goes back to the creating chaos, and that's why the systems are so important. This is financial chaos. This is, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We got to get this driver paid. We owe him the money. He did the work. She did the work, but we have to figure out how we're going to do it. And now we're going to talk about the single biggest cost in payroll, especially payroll done wrong, and that's driver turnover. Uh, Here's something that might make you a little uncomfortable. Most recruiting problems and staffing problems are actually payroll problems. That's where they root out. It's not really a problem with the person doing payroll, the problem with whatever payroll service you're using or however you're doing. That's not the problem. It's the being not clear about what you're paying the driver, being unpredictable, paying them late, being not consistent. All those things erode driver trust. Not showing the work of what you're paying them, which is one of the things that we hang our hat on. Is if our clients send us the loads, we'll put it on the pay stub, so the driver knows exactly what they're getting paid for. That helps build trust. Drivers leave over lack of trust. That is a universal truth. Uh, if you should have that as a box on your exit interview, which by the way, you should do exit interviews even when they're hard. But reason for leaving, other job, that's what the people check. But why did they go apply for the other job? That's really what you want to know. And they applied for the other job because they didn't trust you anymore. And so that's the problem. So, and replacing a driver can be cost $5,000 to $12,000 of the averages that I see. 12,000 seems a little high, but 5,000 is a little low with lost productivity and things like that. And the truck just sitting there. So if payroll issues, when I say payroll issues again, I mean about the whole process and making sure that you're paying the people right. I'm not saying us versus ADP or something like that, just so we're clear. But although we do want to try and help, but if you had two people leave over payroll related issues in a year, that's between $10,000 and $24,000. You just washed out the door. There it went. Bye bye. Wave goodbye to it as it goes. It's not coming back. But you'll never see it on your payroll expense. It won't be in the cost of payroll. It won't be in the quote that you get from us or from anybody else. But you've got to have better systems. So, okay, we've been full of doom and gloom. What do mid-sized fleets do differently that are successful with this, that don't have these problems? High performing mid-sized fleets treat payroll as infrastructure, not administration. It's not the it's not a cost center in and of itself. It's not a necessary evil. You have to pay your drivers. They help make you money. You help them make money. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. But so how do these companies do it that have the lower turnover? Well, they have standardized pay plans. They have defined accessorial rules. They know exactly who they're paying and for what. I want to talk about that one for a second, just because I think it's a great example of a system. If you know I'm going to pay the driver detention after this long, and you can keep track in your TMS, okay, this driver gets an hour detention because they were there this long. That shortens up the time. You don't have to go get the owner to sign off on it. You don't have to there's rules. So you don't have to try and redecide every single time. You know what the rules are. And so our rules are, and we're clear to you in our rollout of our new hire materials. This is how we pay you. This is how we do the accessorials. Then you never have to wonder because it's always right there. They have automated data flow. They can get the data right out of their TMS. I can only speak for us. I can't speak for other payroll services, but if you can get it into an Excel file, we can turn it into good data. We do it with McLeod people all the time. And so their export is clunky at McLeod because it's really a PDF that turns into an Excel sheet, but we've made it work. And we've done it with a lot of other ones too. Consistent onboarding. Your onboarding is a process, and these are the things we're going to do. This is the way we're going to do it. You've got one source of truth. That's your driver manual. If it's should be separate from your employee handbook. They can talk about it in the employee handbook, but you should be separate because that way you can use it for your owner operators if you need to as well. But this is what we're going to do. And then we also have fewer people touching payroll. There's no the dispatcher walking over to the payroll person going, "Hey, can you give this driver a $100 bonus? He bailed me out." Well, no, we have a plan for that. This is what we do for bonuses. You know, the when you had that situation, you're going to have to go back to the owner or the general manager or somebody like that and get it approved. Now you've got extra time and extra friction in your life of trying to do payroll. And then now you're running up against the time clock. If I have to get my payroll submitted so I can get my drivers and my office people paid on time, shouldn't be shouldn't be down to the wire on those things. So if you do all these things, though, if you have the standardized pay plans and the accessorial rules and the consistent onboarding and the single source of truth for how you pay drivers, things like that, payroll becomes boring on your side. It just becomes this thing we got to just press a few buttons, get a few things together. And this can happen. This happens with some of our clients. This can happen for you. We can help make your onboarding of new drivers boring. And you don't have to wonder when they fill out the direct deposit report, is that a 0 or a 6? Because they kind of loop the top, but I'm not sure. We can make all that boring. Boring payroll is profitable payroll. And profitable, again, you're not making money doing payrolls. That's what we do. But your profitable means less cost for you. It means a better experience for not just the office people, but the drivers too. And it makes them trust your company more if you do it right. So the question isn't how much does payroll cost? The real question is how much is payroll costing us that because it isn't built to scale? If you're over 30 trucks and payroll feels heavy, chaotic, or fragile, that's not normal growth pain. That's a system asking to be rebuilt. If you want help with any of this, we can talk about true payroll costs. We can talk about the actual rate, whatever. Visit us at Trekking Payroll, schedule a conversation. Absolutely no charge. I'll tell you, we did one today with a company and she flat out said, we're not going to switch to you, but we have questions. And we said, that's awesome. Let us help you. Our mission is to help trucking families. So reach out, have a conversation. We'd love to talk to you. We learn from you too. And we learn how we can help our clients and we learn how we can help other people. So that's what we get out of it. So don't think that I'm really just saying that so I can send you a spam email every 30 seconds until you sign up or block us, which will be sooner. Yeah, we really mean it. In the next episode, next week, we're going to talk about how payroll decisions quietly impact recruiting and retention. Man, this could be a long episode. So whether you realize it or not, the payroll is the thing that's the end of the process. So yeah, we're going to talk about that next week and help you recruit and retain drivers even better than you do. Until then, Merry Christmas. Drive safe. The weather here is pretty frightful up in Grand Rapids, but I hope it's great where you are.